Okay, we got fireworks tonight. We're going to get to this game. It's going to be the late game. It's going to be the last leg of our three-leg parlay. Speaking of which, 2 of 3 hit last night. I know, it doesn't count. It really only matters when you hit all 3. I was going to say something else, but why ruin a nice Saturday, a nice peaceful Saturday morning? I know it sucks we didn't get the parlay last night. If you're playing these individually, it reminds you, of course, we do hit 2 of 3, but the reality is it doesn't matter unless we hit all 3 for the video. That's what you're keeping track of. That's what I'm keeping track of. That's what I can't wait to see. All right, hit the thumbs up button, please. If you're new to the Odd Shopper channel, welcome. We appreciate you being here. We appreciate your time. Join us. We hit 1 this week. We hit 2 last week. We're trying to end on a positive note, and we're going to build a simple 3-leg parlay. The legs themselves may not be as easy, but we're going to try at the very least. All right, look, all we need on our first leg, folks, is a victory. That's it. We're just looking at a victory. Laying 4 at home against a tough Dallas team, a scrappy Dallas team, a Mavericks team that's coming off this big, humongous victory. Shout out to Ben Raza. He nailed that on the Discord. The problem that Dallas faces, twofold. One, you're going up against an absolute human buzzsaw, which is the Cleveland Cavaliers at home. This is a difficult team. You can't afford to be off. You can't afford to have a rough night shooting. You can't afford to be hero watching and just stargazing as Luka scores 40, 10, and 10, and you still lose by 12. That can't happen against Cleveland in Cleveland. Here is the other problem, and probably the bigger issue. It's not like Dwight Powell is a superstar by any means, but he is a body. And right now, as it stands, Dallas's front court is essentially bigs are down to Christian Wood and JaVale McGee, which is fine, but it's not Mobley, Jarrett Allen fine. So Cleveland has the kicker, which will always be Donovan Mitchell, mass volume scoring, and Luka's going to do his thing on the other side. But now you start to look at the offensive rebounding. You start to look at defending the rim. You start to look at certain things that Dwight Powell can at least help with. A body at least taking up fouls, if just anything like that. So we go Cavs to win this game, not messing with the spread. There's no need to, what have you. We're just going to go Cleveland minus 170. Now, on the locks video, we got in +7 last night. I'm going to stay at +5 here. Chris Middleton is out. Drew Holiday is playing through a non-COVID illness. So this is different, of course. Your body's weird. You play through some sort of stomach bug, it's hard to control that. You can play through pain from like a tendon, a bone, joint. These guys are superhuman professionals. They've been able to withstand that. But that's why we see every now and again somebody run into the locker room to take a shit. It's kind of hard to prevent that when your body is just saying, I don't care what you're doing. Like your brain doesn't have control over that. He's playing through an illness. It's going to be rough. We talked about the Jazz just having an issue right now, relying a little too much on their top heavy guys in Clarkson and Markkanen. You're going to need to get a little more spread out, some thin areas there from scoring. Mike Conley is going to be a big part of it. He has to be a big part of that facilitating. We like Utah +5 here to make up this second leg, mainly because, look, the Bucks are still trying to figure out rotations. Chris Middleton's absence is a thing. I think we overrated it, maybe overstated it a little bit in the video last night, but it is a thing here to kind of look at. They don't have him in this game, and there should be questions about depth now versus a Jazz team who has at least one scorer we know in Beasley. That guys can come off the bench and put a little more pressure on Milwaukee's second unit. 5 points on the road, 7 points on the road was glorious. 5 points on the road is okay. And look, we're starting to even things out, right? You start to look at what's going on here. We go heavy at -170, then we start at -110. Okay, now we're at +203. So just that alone gives us an opportunity to push through here and get back on track, if you will, with more of a 2-leg result for a parlay. Let's leave it at that. Now, I'm going to make a deal with you. I'm going to go through this third leg, and you're going to hang with me, and I'm going to tell you about DraftKings, because this is it, and the Discord, all right? Because this is the final, really, couple of weeks on that. So time is running out in both, but I want to give you our last leg. This is going to put us over the top. That's going to get us to +627. the Pelicans winning the game outright on the road. Yes, they are just more.
Minutes and stuff in place. See what comes down the pipe during the show. Yep. What's happening, Stokastic basketball fans? Welcome to the NBA Strategy Show. Saturday morning. Good morning to everybody out there. Happy Saturday to everybody out there. Big Saturday of sports. We've got an NFL slate, little 3-game NFL slate hopping into the middle of our afternoons today. I think there's a soccer game today. Is that today?
Yeah,
Adam?
Yeah, the third place game is today.
I hate that. I should have checked that before saying it. All right. So the guy who just jumped in and saved me on that question is going to be saving me on questions all throughout the show. That's Adam Scherer, everybody. He's going to be doing the analysis today, taking us through this 5-game NBA slate that we're here to talk about. We're brought to you by Prize Picks, our great sponsors over there. We've also got a great offer for you guys from BetMGM. We've got a little promo for you guys to get 3 NBA free days behind the scenes at Stokastic for free. There's all sorts of good stuff going on at the site. There's all sorts of good stuff on the channel. So make sure you're hitting the like, hit the subscribe. Liking it helps us out with the YouTube algorithms, all that fun stuff. Subscribing helps you. You find out when we go live, when we've got promos. All these different shows are available in podcast form when they're strategy shows, when there's a little shelf life to them. So if you're looking for that, download them, give us a 5-star review on that. Helps us out again and gets you all your favorite info while you're walking your dog or whatever. Adam, what's going on, pal? How was your Friday night? How was your slate last night?
It was pretty good. So I was really frustrated. I think I messed up badly. I kind of realized like 5 minutes after lock that I was a little bit too high on an Echo Okongwu.
Oh, you too?
Yeah.
All right. We made the same mistake.
Not in terms of like how much I play, like also high there. He was my second highest owned guy behind Reed, but like I just kind of I hadn't dropped his rates for being with Trae Young, and it made a much bigger difference than I had expected it to. So I kind of realized like if I had done it correctly, I would have had him around like 28 points instead of like 32 and probably not gotten a lot of him. And I don't know, it was a slate where like I said, I played like 90% of Kongwu, and I just like right out of the gate was just like, shit, I think that was a mistake. And so it kind of just like ruins everything, especially then when he also sucks. Like it's much nicer when it's like, oh, well, I think he was actually kind of a shitty play at that ownership, but at least he smashed and I got lucky. But I did end up having a good night. I got like 6th in the $300 or $200 3 max. Nice. I won the $100 single entry. So like still had a good night, but it was just frustrating because like that was such a winnable slate in large field tournaments when you have a 60% owned center suck and like a million other centers just go nuts. So yeah, it was really frustrating, especially because like I don't view it as, oh, I made a great play, I got unlucky. Like I think I actually should have had a lot less Okongwu if I had not messed up. So yeah, it was frustrating, but made money, so that was nice.
Yeah, that same mistake with Okongwu hurt me a little bit more on the FanDuel slate because I didn't have the ability to pair him with Nas in like a util spot or anything like that. And then I didn't get my Nas changes in before the Okongwu part locked. So I was just locked in with him. And then I was riding it and he was 1,000 more or whatever it was than Nas. So it was going to be brutal regardless, but I was riding it and I was like, all right, if he can get me, in the third quarter, it was looking like we might be able to squeeze 30 out of it. Maybe we'll have like a respectable. No, didn't even play in the fourth quarter.
Yeah,
just absolutely, totally brutal.
And so that was the issue for me too. Is not only did I have 90, like I didn't have time to put Reed in before lock either. Yeah. So like I'm sure if I had done that, it would have gotten me less Okongwu naturally because I had Reed better than Okongwu. But so I ended up just playing like 95% Reed, 90% Okongwu, and I got to like 10% Christian Wood and basically just did not have another center. Whereas, I think if I would have had less Okongwu anyway, because I would have just jammed Reed, probably been closer to like 60% Okongwu, gotten some other centers. But it was frustrating.
Yeah. The way I typically get to Nas, I imagine had I done that quickly and done that right, I would have just had the entire slate full of him. And then, the chips would have fallen where they may. But the way it came down, I was just 20 points shy of being able to do anything competitive. So it was an ugly one last night for me. But welcome aboard to everybody who's jumping into the chat. Good morning to everybody. Seeing a bunch of the regulars saying hello in there. So let's dive into this one, Adam. We've got decent amount of news on deck. Looks like some game time decisions, but nothing overly critical in our first game. Dwight Powell may go. Davis Bertans looks questionable. It doesn't look like we've got any real key components missing in this this Dallas versus Cleveland game. Oh, shit. I was looking at the wrong thing. Let's start us out with the one that I actually listed first on the run sheet. We've got 4 games at 8 o'clock and 1 game at 9 o'clock today. And the 2 sources I was looking at, one has them in a different order. So let's go with the one I actually put on the run sheet, Adam. Let's start with Portland. Going into Houston as 4-point dogs, 228.5 total. The third highest total on the board, fourth highest total on the board today. Decent point spreads or point totals on the board. So should be some good action here. But what are we seeing in the Portland versus Houston game? Start us out on the Portland side.
Yeah, pretty much polar opposite of what we got from Portland yesterday, where you had the really unappealing matchup at Dallas. Now you get them going against a very fantasy-friendly Houston team. Yusuf Nurkic down to $6,800, pulling 15% ownership on DraftKings. That looks good to me. 10-3 on Lillard, shorter slate, not as much opportunity cost at the position. All of that, it makes it easier to get to him. So I think he looks good. Jeremy Grant down to 7,200. Obviously, he takes a hit in terms of production when he plays with Dame, but he's still playing huge minutes. So I think those 3 are the ones you get to first. If you get to some Simons, get to some Hart, but those guys are fine as well. I think any of the starters are good. I would say Nurkic looks the best, followed by Lillard and Grant. Also, for anyone concerned about back-to-backs, I wouldn't be too concerned about this one because the Blazers waved the white flag about 5 or 6 minutes into the third quarter yesterday and just said, yeah, we're done with this shit and on to tomorrow. So shouldn't have too many tired legs for the Blazers today.
Yeah, it should be a decent spot to get to them. And like I said, just, several meaty point totals on the board, but this is definitely one of them. And you've got a few good players in there. Nurk is a guy that comes up a decent amount for me, and it looks like we've got a solid projection on him. He's around his usual complement, 29 minutes, 1.15 FanDuel points per minute. That's a decent center play there. So I'll be getting to some of him. What about on the Houston side of things? Jalen Green, KPJ, looks like we just got our boom bust data came in. So we'll get the ownership and the optimals loaded up here in the next minute or so. Jabari is an exciting young player here. Any pieces of this Houston team coming up for you?
Yeah, I think this is just a really appealing game to get to, and the price tags on Houston are just too cheap, pretty much across the board. Jalen Green at 6,800, Kevin Porter Jr. at 7,100 on DraftKings. Both guys pulling mid-20s ownership. Both guys also with low to mid-20s optimal percentages. They each average around 34.5 minutes per game. Kevin Porter Jr. slightly over a fantasy point per minute. Jalen Green right at about a fantasy point per minute. They both are just going to look good here. Alperen Şengün only $6,100. Playing time always a mild concern with him. He typically plays 27, 28 minutes, but you will get those games where he's in foul trouble. He got hurt the other day, and that's why he didn't play as many minutes in that one, but he is listed as probable for tonight's game, so should expect him to go. All 3 of those guys look really good. 13% ownership coming into Şengün. I think he's pretty comparable to Nurkic on the other side. And then the other 2 starters, kind of like the Blazers, you have, Jabari Smith and Eric Gordon, where they don't look as good as the main 3, but they still look fine. We've seen Jabari Smith's playing time trend up a bit recently as he has remembered how to play basketball, and it's made it easier for the Rockets to keep him on the floor when he is making some shots. Price tag slowly increasing, but I think you expect 30 to 32 minutes. There are going to be games where he plays 34, though. Eric Gordon is certainly the least exciting of the group from a fantasy standpoint. He's about a 2/3 of a fantasy point per minute guy this year. He's been awful from a fantasy standpoint, but he does still play 28 to 30 minutes on a nightly basis. He is only $4,000. It is a 5-game slate, so you can't necessarily count on quite as much value opening up as you would on your 10 gamers. So Gordon right now pulling 13% ownership, and it probably just speaks to the fact that it's not that anybody's saying like, oh yeah, I want to play Eric Gordon here. It's just you put in the pieces you want, and then Eric Gordon fits in at the end.
Yeah, and that's kind of how he's coming through in the tools now that I've got the update around 12% optimal on the FanDuel slate, around 11% optimal on the DK slate. But then you look over to the boom column, he's 1.84% probable to go to 5x plus 10. We've got him at a 19 projection. He's just going to float around, around his median projection, handful of points above, and not really give you those ceiling games at 0.66 FanDuel points per minute. But yeah, it does fit in, and semi-short slate guy with multi-position eligibility at a cheap price is just going to fall in the lineups, and he's a guy who can get there sometimes. Rewinding real quick to the Portland side of things, Just noticing in some of the optimal data on the FanDuel slate, Josh Hart is coming up as 24.3% optimal, 27% owned with an 8% boom score probability, shooting guard, small forward, 5,700. He wasn't as relevant on the DK slate at 5,900, same positioning. Would you have, is he somebody who's on your radar to get to on the FanDuel slate? And would you have any interest in him on the DK slate, just since we didn't get into your real specifics on Portland?
Yeah, I think he's sort of like the luxury Eric Gordon version. Like, you're never
makes sense.
Yeah, you're never excited to play Josh Hart unless like half the team is out. But 17 games this year with Lillard, 0.84 FanDuel points per minute, 33.5 minutes per game. If this game's competitive, you're probably getting a couple minutes on top of that. So it's just somebody that is going to slot into lineups pretty easily. That $5,700 price tag on FanDuel in particular, DraftKings at $5,900. It's not as favorable a price tag. He is still getting some ownership just for that reason, but FanDuel specifically, I do think that he's just going to be a really useful piece that allows you to build out the rest of your lineups the way that you want them.
Yeah, that optimal rate just, kind of stood out when I loaded it up here, so I wanted to go back and call it out. But to your point, 0.81 FanDuel points per minute for the season, same thing on DK. So a guy who is not the best point per minute producer, like you said, maybe a little bit better than the Eric Gordons of the world, but not a key piece. I do like the looks of Şengün on the FanDuel and DK slates. He looks like a nice piece. Several nice parts from this game, though. A lot of guys in the mid-teens as far as optimal rates go, and that's a key factor here. A lot of ownership in this game, too. But that's not really something I'm going to run scared of in an NBA slate. I'll take on ownership in a game that's got a high total and some nice pieces like this. So definitely something I want to go to. Any value pieces, anything from the bench or anything like that on the Houston side that stands out? Any of like the Tari Easons or KJ Martins of the world that you might have interest in odds and ends type pieces?
Yeah, I mean, those would be the two, just from a standpoint of it doesn't take a lot of shit breaking in your favor for them to get there. Tari Eason is essentially just the backup to Jabari Smith. So with Jabari Smith playing more minutes recently, it hasn't been ideal for Tari Eason. But if you get a game where for any reason Jabari Smith plays like 26 or 28 minutes, you're probably getting 20, 22 from Tari Eason. He is over a fantasy point per minute guy. So it's just a situation. It's kind of like the Kevin Love spot yesterday where except for Love had an easier path in theory to getting more minutes. Like the coach just has to say, we're going to play Kevin Love more minutes. Whereas Tari Eason, they're not playing him alongside Jabari. So he doesn't have that same path. Yeah, but it's kind of the same thing where like, if he's going to play 16 minutes, he's going to project for like 17, 18 DraftKings points. You don't need that many more minutes for him to end up being a good play, but on average, he's not going to be a good play. And then with KJ Martin, it's sort of the opposite where he's able to play. He plays multiple positions. If anything happens to like anybody ahead of him in the rotation, he probably will see more run, but he's not as good a point per minute guy as Eason. So you need more extra minutes for him. If he's just going to play 20 to 21 minutes like normal, he projects for, 17 DraftKings points at 3,500, not the end of the world, but probably nothing you're going to want. So they both make some sense as far as it doesn't take that much breaking in your favor for them to end up looking good, but more often than not, they're going to end up just being shitty plays.
Yeah, and maybe parts that fall into a couple lineups as you go through the process, but nothing you're really going out of your way for. Looks like we got a nice super chat from Jorge Jacome, one of our absolute all-the-time regulars. $10 saying, thanks, Adam, for all the pivots mentioned yesterday. No first place, but a bunch of lineups on the top 50 in the mini-max. Improving and hope to see Adam soon at the top. Thanks again, he says. One of our regulars, good to see him doing well. Congrats, Jorge. Congrats to everybody who did well last night out there. Yeah. Hopefully there's a bunch of people who did. I'm sure there are. Had some good numbers, good data, good information on the shows. We saw EMAC make an appearance and go into the late part of the show and then hang out till well after midnight because he's still on Hawaii time in our Discord last night. So a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes, gang. If you want to check it out, get involved behind the scenes. We've got a 3-day free offer that we'll talk about a little later. But right now, let me knock out a piece of business. I'm going to tell you guys about the BetMGM risk-free bet. If you go over to BetMGM and you create a new account, we've got some different links for it. If you sign into your Stokastic account, or if you create a free Stokastic account, you'll see a big red button that pops up. I think it's red. It says BetMGM on it. Click that, follow the steps, create your account, make a deposit at BetMGM. It's got to be at least $10 into that deposit. If you've got $10 in your pocket, put $10 in, make your first bet. It'll be risk-free. If you've got $1,000 burning a hole in your pocket, put the $1,000 into BetMGM, make your first bet. that'll be risk-free. Greg Ehrenberg was given some good tips on what to do with a risk-free bet. I believe it was during the NBA show that I was just mentioning yesterday. So maybe you want to check that out, or just ping Greg in our Discord and ask him what he would do with a risk-free bet up to $1,000, because I'm sure he's got some good advice for you and good thoughts on that. All you have to do when you do that is follow the steps at Stokastic. And alongside that, we're going to give you 2 free months of Stokastic Plus Platinum for free if you follow those steps and create the sportsbook account the way that you're supposed to at BetMGM. So there's instructions, there's all that good stuff. If you read down in the links down there, I'm sure that you can follow the steps from there as well. That'll help you guys out. But get over to BetMGM, make your first paid bet risk-free up to $1,000, and claim 2 free months of Stokastic Plus Platinum. That's the one that includes NFL, NBA, and NHL, every single thing that we cover, every tool, everything except for Fantasy Cruncher. So check those things out today, gang. Adam, game number 2. Let's take a look. I'll make sure that I read the right one off. This time, the Dallas Mavericks, 3.5-point dogs going into Cleveland. The low total on the board, way lower than all the other games, 215.5 in this one. Let's start out on the Dallas side of things. I was reading it off before, but it doesn't look like there's any real critical pieces in this one as far as anybody missing or questionable, anything like that. Anything you're seeing differently as far as that's concerned? And then just start us out as far as Dallas goes. Who do you like that's not named Luka Doncic?
So Dwight Powell is expected to miss this game, and that could move Christian Wood into the starting lineup. You could also get JaVale McGee playing those 12 to 14 minutes, but either way, you're going to have a very shorthanded front court for Dallas, and it's going to make a $6,300 Christian Wood look fantastic, especially because DraftKings has now decided to give him power forward eligibility just in time for him to be one of the most popular plays on the entire slate. So even easier to get to him. Wish he had had that last night. Actually, I don't wish he had had that last night because he would have been more than 10% owned, and that really helped me out. But it's just going to be really, really easy to get to him. Whether he starts, whether he comes off the bench, he's going to play really big minutes here, barring foul trouble, injury, all of that stuff. So Christian Wood looks amazing. It's a bad matchup. It's an unappealing game. Both of these teams play at a slow pace. Cleveland's very good defensively, but Christian Wood is just a very, very good point per minute guy. Normally, he plays 26, 27 minutes, and his price tag reflects that. But now you don't have Maxi Kleber, which is 26 minutes a game. You don't have Dwight Powell, which is around 16 minutes per game. Christian Wood is the only real center that they want to play. Again, I think there's a decent chance that they spot start JaVale McGee just to soak up those minutes. But it wouldn't surprise me if you just basically see JaVale McGee play, 6, 7, 8 minutes to open each half, and Christian Wood literally just played the next 14, or not 14, however many minutes are left. I can't do math. It's too early.
Whatever. And I missed the numbers that you said, so I won't even try.
Whatever 24 minus 6 to 8 is, just play the rest of the first quarter, rest of the third quarter, and close out the game. So wouldn't be at all surprised if you do see a rotation like that. I expect him to play big minutes, even though it is a scary matchup. I still certainly want to get to Christian Wood. Beyond that, there's not a lot. Luka Doncic, it goes without saying, if you can get there, great. But he is $12,500 in what should be a slow-paced game. You're always going to have good guard plays that you can get to. So more of a luxury than a necessity for me, particularly on DraftKings. On FanDuel, I know it is typically easier to get to him, and appears to be the same thing today. He's $600 cheaper on FanDuel than on DraftKings, pulling 14% ownership there compared to 8% on DraftKings. So probably a little bit easier to get there. Outside of that, just sort of filler for me. Tim Hardaway Jr. at $4,900, Dinwiddie at $6,500. Finney Smith is awful, but he's only $3,700. So any of those guys are okay. I do think you potentially see a little bit more playing time from Dinwiddie and Hardaway. I thought that was the case yesterday, but then that game was a massive blowout, so we didn't really get to see it. But we did see a little bit more condensed rotation from Dallas a couple games ago when Kleber was out. I think that there's a good chance maybe instead of 32 minutes for Dinwiddie, you get 34. Maybe instead of 30 for Hardaway, you get 32. So that does make them a little bit interesting. But again, just a really brutal matchup and unappealing game in terms of pace.
Yeah, Dinwiddie and Penny. Wow. That's where my brain is this morning. Timmy Hardaway Jr. Both look, like kind of their swappable parts look like themselves to me today. The guy that kind of stood out, Christian Wood, obviously with the massive optimal rate in the mid 30s on both sites, getting plenty of ownership, but he looks like a key obvious piece. The guy that's standing out to me that's really concerning, the guy that they named this activity after, DFS, Dorian Finney-Smith, 23% optimal on FanDuel, 9.9 leverage score because only 13% of the field is going there. He's different on DK, 14% optimal, 7.9% owned. So nice leverage play over there as well. I'm hoping that something changes about that optimal rate as the day goes by, but multi-position eligible, both forward spots, 4,200 on FanDuel. He's a 0.58 FanDuel point per minute guy. So is he viable today at that price and that positioning on both sides? You mentioned him as kind of a swappable part, but let's dig into him a little bit more. And then how much do we have to concern ourselves with protecting ourselves from rostering a guy like him at 0.58 FanDuel points per minute, and then like a pair of the guys from the other game at 0.6 and 0.8 FanDuel points per minute? Like, what's the maximum number of these limited guys in a point per minute sense that you would want in your lineups where maybe you'll sacrifice some optimal rate or something like that to try and get some points per minute from somebody else?
So, yeah, I mean, Finney Smith, not a good point per minute guy. Never has been, but this year it's been glaring. Since the start of last year, 0.68 DraftKings points per minute, 0.67 FanDuel points per minute. This year, like you said, 0.59. You're just seeing Luka do even more in every aspect, and it's cutting into these, fringe role players. And you've also seen Finney Smith's minutes kind of drop off recently. I do think he's likely to be a beneficiary of this team being shorthanded. I would expect that you're getting back into, low 30s playing time for him. So I think he's just another one of those pieces where you don't want him, but he's just going to fit in there and open other stuff up for you. As far as how many I'll play in a lineup, I don't care. I obviously care. I don't want a bunch of them, but I don't set any sort of rule on it because it just kind of sorts itself out. But yeah, Finney Smith is definitely just somebody that you're not going to feel good about. I will say Reggie Bullock is a really interesting pivot, and it's disgusting to have to talk about either of these guys but Reggie Bullock this year even worse, 0.44 DraftKings points per minute. Just unbelievably bad production from Reggie Bullock this year, but historically he's more in line with what Dorian Finney-Smith does. And you have seen increased playing time for Bullock recently with Maxi Kleber being out. He had played a bunch of minutes 2 games ago. Yesterday, he played 29 minutes. Don't know who would have closed that game. But even in the first half, you got about 15 minutes from Reggie Bullock. So I do think you're going to get similar playing time between Dorian Finney-Smith and Reggie Bullock. Finney-Smith projected for 8% ownership. Bullock projected for none. That's an interesting spot that you can go to. If you want to even take some shots on a 3K, Frank Ntilikina, he is pretty firmly in the rotation as well. He played about 11 or 12 minutes in the first half yesterday. It's likely you're getting low to mid-20s in minutes from him. Again, not a good point per minute guy. 0.65 DraftKings points per minute this year in 86 minutes, and that's pretty much in line with what he's done in his career. But I guess my point is, if you are forced from a value standpoint to go to poor point per minute guys from the Mavs, there are others that you can use instead of Dorian Finney-Smith.
Yeah. And if you're just looking to go out of your way to roster some terrible points per minutes guys that are former Knicks, you can go to those 2 guys as well, because they're sitting there. Those are not 2 guys near and dear to my heart. But yeah, I get your point, particularly around Bullock with, an expectation of around 30 minutes. Guy who goes out there and can have those games where he'll take a number of threes, and can have those games where he'll make some, maybe come up with a steal or 2, a block or 2, and get you there. So I can see that as a reasonable pivot from DFS, who's already a mediocre play, for saving me a couple bucks going down to Reggie Bullock a few times. That makes sense. Frankie Ntilikina is a stretch for me at 3,700 on the FanDuel slate, 3,000 on DK. I can see where you're coming from a little bit more.
So with him, I do want to mention, because I should have before, that's dependent also on Josh Green for sure. On Josh Green being out. Also, Davis Bertans is questionable. If Bertans is in, he can cut into playing time from Ntilikina and
that's how we have it projected right now. We've got 9
Bullock. But if Bertans is out and Green is out, like we saw yesterday, I do think the minutes are going to be there for those guys.
Okay. Yep. Yeah, that adds 22 minutes onto the board from where we've got it projected now. So that's we've got Frankie right now at 13. If he goes up into that 28 range, he's obviously, I think, going to hit the board as a at least more interesting value play than he looks like right now in the numbers. So that's definitely a good call out. What about the Cleveland side of this one? We talked about how they're very slow, fairly slow paced, fairly stout, defensive unit here. We've got some interesting pieces though. Darius Garland, you mentioned Kevin Love before, could see some opportunity here. 23% optimal on FanDuel, 26% on DK, and another really strong looking leverage piece, at least early in the day. I would expect that if those optimal rates and projections hold, that he's going to pick up some ownership as the day goes on. But what are we thinking on the Cleveland side to start us off here?
Yeah, so, still a very unappealing game for them as well. Dallas is an incredibly slow team, but you do have some decent pricing here. Kevin Love coming in at 3,700, 16% ownership. We saw 19 minutes from him yesterday, so we have seen the playing time increase in, I believe now, 4 straight games. And in games with Jared Allen overall this year, he has averaged around 20 minutes per game. So if Love plays today, it is a back-to-back, so we'll have to wait and see that. But if Kevin Love plays, I do think at 3,700, he looks like an interesting value. Power forward, center eligible, good point per minute guy. I think that, you can project 18 to 20 minutes. Garland and Mitchell are always just going to be solid options. Garland and Mitchell both average around 36 minutes per game. Garland around a fantasy point per minute, Mitchell around 1.15 to 1.2 fantasy points per minute. So they both look good. The one guy that really stands out to me, though, from a tournament standpoint is Jared Allen at 6,700. You have a very favorable matchup against this Dallas front court that has nothing. I mean, Christian Wood is good offensively, but that's about it. Yep. There's a reason that Jason Kidd doesn't start him and typically doesn't close him. Jared Allen should just sort of have his way from a rebounding, scoring standpoint. And he's also just playing huge minutes. He'd been playing basically 36 minutes at least every game since he came back from his injury, with the exception of one where he was in foul trouble. Played 38.8 minutes yesterday. He's only pulling about 10% ownership on DraftKings. I get it that center is, like a loaded position, and you have Yusuf Nurkic here, you have Alperen Şengün here. You're going to use Christian Wood at center sometimes, but now you can use him at power forward. I just think it's still a situation where, I said it yesterday, like, it's not that I think the industry is wrong, because when you are doing projections for the masses, you kind of don't want to like run the risk of going prematurely to like bump someone's minutes. Like for the season, Jared Allen's averaging like 34 minutes per game. I think the correct way to project him, especially if other people are relying on your stuff, is like 33 or 34 minutes.
Yeah.
But from like my own personal standpoint, where like it's my money, I'll lose it if I want to. The guy's playing 36 minutes every game. So I do think it's kind of a spot where like if it's risky, because like there's no guarantee that's, the long-term case, but there is a decent chance that we're just in a spot right now where there's a gap between what Jared Allen is actually doing and what Jared Allen is consistently being projected to do. And it just kind of drives his ownership down a little bit.
It makes sense. And that's a spot where it makes sense to consider it for a second, because people do tend to talk about, hey, I like this guy and I went in and I changed his projection without really having a reason why, or having some of these bizarre reasons why, where in this specific case, that's a really good reason why you might want to take a look at a guy's projection and just see, all right, this is median, this is industry expectation, this is what he's averaged for the season. But like you were just saying, over the course of the last handful of games, that number has changed. There's a different situation, or potentially a different situation. Look at the last three. It's been 37 minutes a game the last three. So there is an expectation that could change. So if you check a player like that and you think, all right, that looks like a fairly low median fantasy projection, we also run our minutes projection. So you can check what we've got him projected for in minutes. We've got him at 33.2 minutes. So just like Adam was just saying, everybody, it's a situation where we're projecting him for around more what he's done for the season, because we don't want to lead people astray without having a little bit more surety that that's going to be a change situation going forward, that this is a permanent change where he's getting more minutes. So you can make that adjustment yourselves. That might be one that's worthwhile to look for. Whereas it's a guy's birthday and I think he's going to play really well today, might not be such a good reason to go change somebody's project.
Yeah. And since he came back from injury, 38 minutes, 32 in a game where he had 5 fouls, 37, 36, 36, 39.
There you go.
For me personally, I'm going 36 minutes on Jared Allen.
Yep. Yeah. Seems like a reasonable expectation that would be the case, and a really good reason to adjust that a little bit. Nobody's saying go out there and add, 15 fantasy points to the guy tonight and get 100% of them. Give him a little nudge, and that might come through in our projection. So pay attention to where we've got the minutes. If you see it later on in the day at 35 minutes, 36 minutes, don't give it that nudge. It's already been taken care of for you. So
yeah, and the easy way to do that too, for this kind of goes without saying, but like, you don't have to arbitrarily do it. You can just divide the points by the minutes and then multiply by 36 if you want to.
That's also
you don't need to just like start thumbs up and stuff.
Yeah, you don't have to guess at it. Right. Yeah. Very, very good point. Anything else from the Cleveland side, outside of the odds and ends that you mentioned? A lot of, the guards and wings look, odds and endsy as they are.
So Lamar Stevens was the big topic yesterday. Chetty Osman was back in the rotation, played 20 and a half minutes. Okoro played 9.5. So I still view Lamar Stevens the exact same way I had described him yesterday. I think projecting him for 26 to 28 minutes makes the most sense. Sure, maybe you'll get another game where Chetty just gets kicked out of the rotation and Stevens plays a ton. It certainly could happen here. I mean, he is out there for defensive reasons, and you do have Luka Doncic playing 37, 38 minutes for the Mavs. So this certainly could be a game where Lamar Stevens plays more. Right now, pulling 3% ownership. I do think if Dorian Finney-Smith is going to get 8% ownership, and some of these other crappy point per minute guys are going to get ownership, Lamar Stevens at 3% is interesting, especially in a matchup against Luka. I hope I just don't have to play any of them, but I do think Lamar Stevens is kind of interesting right now.
Okay. Yeah. Carrying a 26.4 minute projection as things stand right now. Definitely a little bit of leverage on both sites, a little bit optimal rate. So definitely a piece. He's not somebody I would chase out of my lineups by any means. So yeah.
It was Dallas. I couldn't remember. It was Dallas that he played 38 minutes a couple games ago too.
Okay. So another reason to potentially expect a handful more minutes. So definitely a guy to keep in mind as well. We're looking around the board for value later, especially if nothing else emerges and you want somebody who's not Dorian Finney-Smith. Could be a differentiator there. Let's talk real quick about our pals at Prize Picks, gang. Prize Picks, if you guys aren't aware, is a great site to play on. It's no sharks. There's no optimizers. There's no mass entries. You're not playing against people like Adam. You're not playing against people like Alex Baker. It's daily prop-based contests where you're playing against Prize Picks. You're building out confidence cards, 5-player lineups. It can net you up to 10 times your entry fee if you get them all right. They've got cross-sport entries, so you can put some NFL picks and NBA picks onto the same card. There's probably still hockey going on today, even though basketball and football are both going. So you can throw some NHL picks into there. My Rangers are on a bit of a roll lately. So hopefully the NHL is turning around and I can pay attention to it again a little bit. We've got a link in the description below to get you 1 free month of Stokastic Plus Platinum alongside your Prize Picks deposit if you're a new subscriber over at Prize Picks or a new member at Prize Picks. There's also a $100 deposit match bonus if you go over there, sign up and make a deposit with Prize Picks for the first time. So go check out Prize Picks, use the link in the description below, claim your free month of Stokastic Plus, make sure you're getting your $100 deposit match bonus. Just take $100, pop it in there. Now you've got $200 to play with. It's easy money, guys. And we've got all the projections you could use. Just go to our player props in our betting section, or go to Odds Shopper and use those probabilities to pick off easy plays on Prize Picks. Couldn't be easier, gang. Go check out Prize Picks. Let's talk about game 3 on deck here, Adam. Memphis Grizzlies, 8.5-point favorites going into OKC. A lot of question marks for OKC in that already question mark filled rotation that they run. 232.5-point total, though, highest one on the board. So an interesting spot. Certainly have seen some big time values from Memphis over the past few days. Looks like they'll be basically full strength, but who knows? And then, like I said, a lot of questions on the OKC side. So start us out with Memphis. What are we seeing there?
Yeah, so I mean, nice spot for them. Should be a high-scoring game. Sucks when OKC is in high-scoring games because you kind of have to pay attention to them, and I really prefer not to. But for Memphis, it sets up nicely. Ja Morant pulling 22% ownership at 10,600 on DraftKings. The guy is really, really good. Averages 1.5 to 1.6 DraftKings points per minute without Desmond Bane this year. Certainly happy to get to him. He's one reason why I think it is so difficult, especially on DraftKings, to get to Luka. You can just get Ja Morant for $2,000 less, and obviously Luka projects better, but probably not $2,000 better, especially when you also keep in mind that it means one more Dorian Finney-Smith or Lamar Stevens in your lineup as opposed to not having those guys. So really, really, really like getting to Morant. Steven Adams at 5,300 I think looks good. Not a very good rebounding team for OKC, and depending on who is in or out for them, a really bad rebounding team, they may really be missing guys in the front court. Steven Adams, obviously his best games are going to come when he can get offensive rebounds, putbacks. That's typically how he's going to be scoring. So sets up well for him. 5,300, should play 28 minutes or so. Like getting to him. Jaren Jackson's price tag dropped a bit. He's down to 6,900. He's pretty interesting there. The playing time is always the concern with Jaren Jackson. He fouls frequently. There's not as many guys for him to foul on OKC, so not as much foul risk. And he has overall been better this year at limiting the fouling, especially compared to what he was earlier in his career, where it was just a given that he was going to be in foul trouble. He's been extremely productive from a fantasy standpoint, averaging around 1.3 DraftKings points per minute in the games without Desmond Bane. I do think that's a little bit higher than we see going forward. He has shot much better than in previous years. So maybe he's improved. Like, he's young, it's possible. And if he has, it's really good for Memphis. But I think it's likely that, he comes back to earth a little bit. He also, has that game where he tied a career high in blocks 2 games ago mixed in. Clearly, you're not expecting that to happen again anytime soon. But Even if you settle him in at like 1.2 DraftKings points per minute, if he gets out there for 28 minutes, which is kind of like the top end scenario for him, he's going to look pretty good, and he's not getting much ownership. So I do like the volatility that comes with Jaren Jackson when he's not popular. Same can be said for Dylan Brooks at 6,600. But the thing that makes me like Jackson a little bit more than Brooks is that Brooks's volatility, like, yeah, he'll get steals, but his volatility mostly comes from making shots, more shots than normal. But that still requires him to take shots away from John Morant, which just isn't going to happen all that often. Whereas with Jaren Jackson, like, his volatility comes from blocking shots, which doesn't mean that John Morant has to do less. It has nothing to do with John Morant. So I think it's a little bit easier for Jaren Jackson to have that random upside game than it is Dylan Brooks. But Brooks certainly can still get there because if Morant gives him the ball, he's going to shoot it.
Yeah, absolutely. Brooks will be on the radar probably in some of my lineups, but not a guy I'm going to go like way out of my way for. 18.9% optimal on FanDuel. Not much on the boom side of things. He's priced appropriately, multi-position shooting guard, small forward, but he's 24.6% owned. Like I said before, I don't care that much about individual ownership, but for a piece like that, kind of like one of those wing shooting guard, small forward type guys who's a shooter, kind of volume scoring dependent, I can get away from that number when he's not coming up as a positive leverage play or around a positive leverage play at that price. If he was in the mid to low fives, it would be a different story. But I do think Triple J is a super interesting piece. FanDuel, he's coming up 11.6 in the leverage score column, 16.1% optimal against 4.5% ownership. On DK, 17.4% optimal, a little bit more owned at 9.4%, but still a nice 8 leverage score. He's 6,900 power forward center on DK, 8,000 power forward center on the FanDuel slate. Do you still have interest on FanDuel with decent optimal rate and all that leverage? That makes him an appealing piece, right?
For Jackson, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, sort of.
A little bit more expensive, but you're
right. So like 8K is tough to get to. FanDuel, you do get extra points for blocks, so that's right. Favorable for Jaren Jackson.
Yeah, 145 on the points per minute over
there. And you do have some other spots, like for example, we talked about Josh Hart, where like he's just more favorably priced on FanDuel. So I don't like the $8,000 price tag, but I do still like the upside he gives you. So it's certainly more difficult to get there. I understand why he's getting 4% ownership, but if you can find a way there, he's a good piece where like I don't think I get a lot of him on FanDuel, but in a given lineup, if you just happen to you fit in a bunch of pieces you like, you have 8K ish left at power forward, Jackson's a good way to differentiate just because he is capable of giving you that game.
Yeah, that seems like a great click in that situation. You've got 8,200 and you're deciding between, two different power forwards, like spend 8,000 on him, leave the 200 on the table and take the great tournament play because nobody's going there. So I do like that as an appealing spot. It's one I'm going to definitely, at the very least, as I'm going through my process and I've got my big pool of, thousands of lineups or whatever, I'm going to be keeping an eye out for how much of him I'm getting to. And I'm going to want to be over the field. It might not be a play where I say, hey, I'm going to come up with 45, 50% Jaren Jackson. But if the field stays 4 to 8%, somewhere around there, I can land myself 15, 20, 25%, something like that in a tournament, I'm pretty happy with that. I think that's an interesting, compelling spot unless something.
And yeah, I mean, to me, it's not even somebody that I would necessarily expect to be over the field from like a total exposure standpoint, but it's just somebody that like is going to be a really, really good fit in very specific lineups.
Makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
I don't know how many of those
like a
specific lineups
build,
I end up
right?
making.
If you use, but if your lineup includes, star X, star Y, and value pieces A, B, and C, there might just not be that space for him where he just gets optimized out. And we see that a lot of times with good plays. So those are, again, guys that it makes sense to maybe not nudge, maybe not change in optimizers unless you notice that they're just not coming up at all. And they look like strong plays like that, where they are a decent amount optimal. They are not getting all that much ownership attention. Then maybe that justifies a little bit of a nudge in process. Humboldt in chat says, I'm tired of spending up for Luka and having some 7K guy tie him in DK points. I will try Morant instead and save the money. Agree, disagree?
Welcome to the club.
There you go. Kickstart. You're not alone, or Humboldt rather. You're not alone. Kickstart also said, hello, what's going on? Kickstart. We got a lot of the regulars hanging out in chat, but not enough likes. Adam got up early for this show on a Saturday. I've been up. I was up all night. I've lost track of when I wake up and go to sleep anymore. It's just a completely random scatter shot. But Adam was, I'm sure, in bed really early last night. Early bird gets the worm, and it was up bright and early to do this show. So give him some love, give him some likes. Guy's doing some hard work here, and we're only at 51 likes with 300 and change people watching. With that in mind, let's go. Did we say everything we needed to say about this one?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. So that was Memphis. What about the OKC side of things? We've got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, top of the board, 10-2 on FanDuel, 9-9 on DK. Coming up as a more optimal piece on the FanDuel slate, but interesting on both sites. And then guys like Josh Giddey, Lou Dort, who never happy to get to him, 11.2 FanDuel points in the last outing, 0.83 FanDuel points per minute for the year, but I guess he's on the board again. What do we like on the OKC side of things? And what do we think about the injury concerns and everything?
Yes, I mean, this one is kind of impossible to talk about right now because we have no idea who's playing for OKC. Darius Bazley was out yesterday. Robinson Earl was out yesterday. Lou Dort got hurt in the third quarter and left the game. No idea if he's playing today. Don't know who's up from the G League. They called up Lindy Waters yesterday. He ended up playing 11 minutes in the second half after Dort got hurt. Don't know if he'll still be up. Don't know if the other Jalen Williams will be up. He was up yesterday, still didn't play though. So there's a lot of moving pieces here that we're not going to have an answer on until we get the injury report. What we can say with confidence is that $9,900 Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is going to look good. He's just a really good player. He's averaging around 35 minutes per game. Josh Giddey looks fine at 6,900. He should play low to mid 30s. We got 30 minutes from him yesterday. We'd gotten 36 the game before. I continue to just project around 32 minutes for Josh Giddey, and that accounts for OKC doing OKC things with his rotation. Kind of just averages out there. Jalen Williams, the guard or wing, whatever he is, played 33 minutes yesterday. He's actually been a very consistent guy recently in terms of playing time. I still kind of take that with a grain of salt because it's OKC, but he is somebody that I would expect them to want to get more minutes to for developmental reasons. He has been getting them recently. So I think those minutes are likely to be there, especially if like Dort is out. So $4,600 on him. He's pulling 15% ownership. That makes sense. Darius Bazley right now projected for 13% ownership. He's 3,500 with power forward center eligibility. The last game that he was in, he started and played a bunch of minutes. If he starts today, I think he's a good value play, but I also have no idea if he's even playing. Pokashevsky, 3,900, getting 28% ownership. He's another one where he started yesterday. He played 24 minutes. If he starts today, I'll give him a 24-minute projection. That'll make him look good at 3,900. But the last game Bazley was in, Poku came off the bench and played 8 minutes. So again, like I have no idea what we have available for Oklahoma City. So outside of SGA, Giddey, those guys looking good, Jalen Williams looking fine. I can't say a lot with confidence because I have no idea who's playing for this team today.
Yep. And I'm not even going to look around and try and find a follow-up question or anything. Tune in for the later shows, gang, and we'll catch you up on what's going on with OKC because right now we have no idea. And Mikey's panicking in the background because we got like 10 minutes left in the show. And I forgot we can't go long today because there's football. So let's just move on. We'll go to the next one. Let me tell the gang out there real quick, 2 things. One, you can get 3 free days of NBA. If you want to get behind the scenes, check out our NBA projections, ownership, all that different stuff that we talk about. Go down, use the link in the description down there. Totally commitmentless. Go over, make a free account, get 3 free days of NBA access. All the different tools, the boom, bust, everything that we talk about on shows. Gives you a great test drive of the tools. I'm confident you're going to want to subscribe to it and stay on board after you sign up there. Lineup Generator is the perfect tool for building winning lineups for any DFS contest. We've got NBA. We've got all sorts of stuff going on in the Lineup Generator. You can build lineups in seconds. We can give you the entire lineup, or now there's a new feature in it. You can click on a few guys, add the players to the lineup, take a guy out, swap a new guy in, and build the lineup customized to your standards. So check out the Lineup Generator as well. Adam, Utah Jazz, 5-point dogs going into Milwaukee, 230-point total on deck. What do we like on the Utah side of this one?
Yeah, so we assuming that they're just going to have all their guys in because their injury report, they're missing Colin Sexton and Fontecchio potentially, but that's it. You should just kind of get similar rotations to what we've been getting. $8,100 Lauri Markkanen should play 34 minutes or so. Played 37 in regulation last game. So that does, sort of reinforce what I've been saying, that I think his bump in playing time when Mike Conley got hurt had nothing to do with Mike Conley. It had to do with Utah changing up their rotations. So I continue to think you're getting, 34 plus minutes most nights for Lauri Markkanen. Tough matchup against Milwaukee, but only pulling 9% ownership makes him kind of interesting here. He's a 1.1 to 1.2 fantasy point per minute guy. Conley at 5,500, not the highest ceiling, doesn't shoot a lot, doesn't score a lot, does get a lot of assists, played around 27, 28 minutes in regulation last game. I continue to expect 28 to 30 minutes from him. Makes him look decent. Jordan Clarkson, you know the type of ceiling that you're getting. You saw it last game where he just went absolutely nuts as a scorer. Typically going to play 34-ish minutes. 7,300 is a reasonable price tag. He's getting 10% ownership. So those are the three guys getting ownership. I think they all make sense. The front court, though, is interesting from a tournament standpoint. Kelly Olynyk is $5,800. He played about 30 minutes in regulation last game. I think that's where you see him settle in games where he is not in foul trouble. The problem is that he is frequently in foul trouble, and obviously going up against Milwaukee, you have a big guy in the paint that draws fouls a lot.
A little opportunity to get some fouls, yeah.
Yeah, so there's obvious foul risk here, but from a tournament standpoint, a $5,800 Olynyk does have some merit. And then the center position between Jared Vanderbilt and Walker Kessler, $5,400 to Vanderbilt, $5K to Kessler, Vandy getting 4% ownership, Kessler getting 1%. It's very difficult to go to Kessler because he is center only. But if you do get Jared Vanderbilt in foul trouble, you can get, last game you got like 28 minutes from Kessler because Vanderbilt only played 20. So there is that upside there, and Kessler does give you a lot of block upside as well. Obviously, there is massive foul risk for both of those guys in this spot, but really, really difficult to want to get to either guy, but they are not getting ownership, and they are cheap enough where if one of them happens to get to 28 minutes, they would actually project reasonably well. It's just that you can't project either of them to actually do that.
Yeah, and looking up and down this team, just nice leverage pieces. Nobody really crashing through in the boom score probabilities, showing like massive ceilings. Everybody kind of looks like who they are, but nice leverage scores on the FanDuel slate. You do have a 25% optimal rate on Mike Conley, despite the lack of a massive ceiling opportunity there with a 9% boom score probability. But that's a decent little optimal rate there. So I'm going to be interested in a lot of pieces from the Jazz, and then looking at the other side. There's a couple big spots to talk about here. At the top of the board, Pat Connaughton drawing a 34.4% optimal rate on FanDuel, 32.7% on DK, and 30+% ownership on both sites as a value piece, 3,900, 3,400 site to site. And then Giannis. Giannis is 33.9% optimal on FanDuel, 19.8% on DK. 16.2 leverage score on FanDuel because he's 17% owned, and a 12% leverage score on DK at 7% ownership. So two major pieces there on opposite ends of the salary spectrum. Are you going to be getting to both of those guys? And then what about the rest of this team? Obviously, no Chris Middleton still, and some other pieces banged up. Yeah,
so no Chris Middleton, and Giannis is also questionable. So you have the potential for this to be the Drew Holiday show because he is probable to return today. So if we assume Giannis is in, Giannis is kind of what Giannis has been for a while. If you get there, great. He's Giannis. He's fantastic. It's a good spot. All of that. He's also 12-3 on DraftKings, and I would really, again, just prefer not to be playing guys like Dorian Finney-Smith if I don't have to. But if you get there, great. Drew Holiday is going to look pretty good at 8,300. We're back in the situation that he's been in pretty much all season long, where he's been about a 1.2 fantasy point per minute guy. I'm not expecting him to be limited. If we get news that he is, then obviously my opinion changes. But assuming you're getting 34, 35 minutes in this spot from Drew Holiday at 8,300, I think he's going a little bit under-owned. We've been getting Brook Lopez and Bobby Portis playing more minutes alongside each other. This is certainly a matchup where I expect that to happen. You just have a big front court for the Jazz, and it's going to make it really easy for those two to play together. Bobby Portis has power forward eligibility. Lopez obviously does not. Makes it a little bit easier to get to Portis from a positional standpoint, but Lopez is only 5,100, so I think they both look good. And then you get to guys like Grayson Allen that are sort of just lineup filler, last guy in type pieces. If Giannis is out, Portis is going to look a lot better because he probably will start. Drew Holiday is going to look a lot better because he's just going to have the offense run through him. Pat Connaughton at 3,400 is getting a lot of ownership. I don't know if he'll start in place. I don't think he'll start in place of Middleton. I'm kind of surprised he's getting as much ownership as he is, but it is likely he plays like 24, 25 minutes. So he's a reasonable value piece. I do think that ownership projection comes down. I don't really get why it's so high, but
all right.
Yeah,
so
something
one to keep an eye on for sure as the day goes along there, gang. If you're starting your process this early in the day, definitely go back to it as lock approaches. Make sure you're tuning in for those Oklahoma City pieces and all that good stuff. And of course, the news on where Pat Connaughton's ownership is. Let's go to the last game on deck. About 4 minutes left in the show. New Orleans going into Phoenix. Phoenix 3.5 point favorites, 228 total in this one as of the last update. What do we like from the New Orleans side?
Zion pretty much always going to look good. That doesn't change here. He's been playing around 34 minutes per game. He Is averaging around 1.4 DraftKings points per minute in the games without Ingram. Projected for 9% ownership, 10K. Like him in tournaments. CJ McCollum still 7,400. He's been disappointing from a fantasy standpoint compared to last year, but he still averages a little over a fantasy point per minute in these games without Ingram. He's likely to play mid-30s in minutes, so he looks pretty good. And then the center position with Joval, $5,200. Disappointing game last time out in terms of scoring, but the playing time was there. He got 26 minutes. Didn't play in overtime, still got 26 minutes. Larry Nance, of course, played the minutes where Joval wasn't out there. And I expect to continue to see that. We got a little bit of Nance alongside Joval last game as well. Not something that I expect to happen all that often, but 4,700 for Nance, power forward eligible, 8% ownership. Joval, 5,200, 17% ownership. Wouldn't play them together, but I think they're both cheap enough that they look reasonable. And then Trey Murphy pulling 12% ownership. Shooting guard, small forward, should play 32 minutes or so. Not a great point per minute guy. He's at about 0.75 fantasy points per minute in his starts with Zion, but certainly somebody that can fill out some lineups for you.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see how Joval and Nance collide with Markkanen and Olynyk in my lineups, because those are four guys that I get to a lot, and they have power forward and center combined eligibilities, and they're going to be colliding with one another. The Phoenix side of things looks like some Devin Booker is going to be interesting on both sides, of course. Definitely a piece on the DK slate with Jock Landale at 3,900, coming up as 42.6% optimal in the center role with no DeAndre Ayton there. So what do we think from Phoenix here?
I think that Bismack Biyombo and Jock Landale are flipped. Landale, they're both good plays. They're both cheap. They're both good enough point per minute guys. You are likely to get a 48-minute split from them. We saw that in the last game. We had seen that previously when Ayton was out. But this is very similar to, I think, what happened last time Ayton was out. In the first game, Biyombo got in foul trouble. And so if you just look at the minutes, it's like, 27 minutes to Landale, 18 to Biyombo, even though Biyombo started. But Biyombo was looking to play actual minutes. He had a 8-minute stint to open the game. He subbed in with 9.5 minutes to go in the second quarter, picked up 2 fouls, went back to the bench. Landale came in. Then he picked up another foul, his fourth, a minute and a half into the third. I think if everything goes how the Suns want it to, I think you're saying 28 minutes for Biyombo, 20 for Landale. I think projecting it 26, 22 makes some sense because, foul trouble does exist. But right now, if you're going to get 14% ownership to Biyombo and 32 to Landale, Biyombo is just a really easy pivot there, even though Landale is the better point per minute guy. So I do think they're both good plays. I just think the ownership should be similar between them. Devin Booker at 9,100, probably a little cheap for Devin Booker. That's always going to look good. Mikal Bridges is going to play huge minutes. That's pretty appealing. So, and then, Chris Paul also playing more minutes. Cam Payne is still out. So that does potentially give Paul more minutes as well. You got 36 last game. You've gotten 38 the game before that. So all of the starters plus Landale, I think, look good.
Yep. So we'll keep our eye on the Biyombo and Landale situation as the day goes along. Just watch for the minutes projections, watch for any news about starting minutes, et cetera, et cetera. I do think Devin Booker really stands out on the FanDuel slate. I'll end us on that. 8,700 over there, 25% optimal. Getting a lot of ownership, but I don't really care when I can get Devin Booker at 8,700 there. So with that, Adam, awesome job today. You guys can find Adam at Ship My Money DFS on Twitter and all those good things. We've got a ton of content coming up the rest of the day. 11 o'clock coming right up, NFL Deeper Dive with Greg and Neil. 12 o'clock noon with Eric and Matt for NFL. Fantasy Football Q&A with Nick Lepre over on the Fantasy Football channel. 3 to 4 MMA Live Before Lock with Jason Floyd and Pete Rogers. 6 o'clock NBA Deeper Dive with Emac and Ryan. 7 o'clock NBA Live Before Lock with Greg and Matt LaMarca. So just a loaded day of action. Good luck out there today, gang. Thanks for hanging out. Hit the like, all that good stuff. I think I said all that good stuff like 10